Claude Opus 5 costs exactly half what Fable 5 costs. And on the benchmarks where they went head-to-head, Opus 5 won. $5 per million input tokens versus 10, and the quality is nearly identical. Both of these models just dropped from Anthropic, so the pricing and benchmark data is fresh. I'm comparing Claude Opus 5 versus Fable 5 across 5 real tests, pulling from 13 verified sources, no vendor money, no spin, what I didn't expect going in. There are real gaps in the data, and one of those gaps could completely change which model you should pay for, depending on your workflow. Stick around, because the conditional verdict is not what you'd guess. So if you're running any kind of agentic workflow, coding pipeline, or long document task through an API, the model you pick directly hits your unit economics. At scale, a 2x price difference isn't small, and that's the difference between a profitable product and one that bleeds money on every request. Test 1, context and long document handling. So imagine you're feeding a model a 900,000 token code base, or a massive research doc, and it just starts hallucinating things from the middle of the file because it lost a thread. That's a real failure mode, and it's the kind of thing that breaks production pipelines silently. I looked at what both vendors actually published here, and what surprised me is that on paper, they're identical. Both claim a 1 million token context window, both cap output at 128,000 tokens, Fable 5, has community reports showing recall degradation around 800,000 tokens, while Opus 5 claims full quality retention at depth, though that claim comes straight from Anthropic's own LO score, not independent testing. Honestly, you've got to take it with a grain of salt here. The only evidence Opus 5 handles depth better is Anthropic's own GDP-val AAV2 LO score at 1861, and no independent side-by-side test exists. Fable 5's degradation is community reported, not formally measured either. So both claims are a little soft. I was expecting one of them to pull ahead clearly, but neither did. This one's a tie. The specs match on paper, the real-world depth claims are unverified on both sides. So the scoreboard stays flat. Claude Opus 50, Fable 5-0, 1 tied. Nobody earns a point until we get independent long context testing. Test 2, reasoning depth and complex problem solving. When your agent hits a multi-step task and picks the wrong branch early, the whole chain falls apart and you're paying for every bad token it generates trying to recover. Weak reasoning doesn't just produce wrong answers, it produces expensive wrong answers. What surprised me here is how Opus 5 performed on the benchmarks, where a direct comparison actually existed. On OS World 2.0, Opus 5 outperformed every other model at a given cost, beating Fable 5's best result at just over a third of the price. On Arc AGI 3, Opus 5 scored 3 times higher than the next best model. And Cursor Bench was basically a dead heat within 0.5%, but Opus 5 costs half as much per task now. Fable 5 does post strong isolated coding numbers, SWE Bench Pro at 80.3%, and Frontier Code at 29.3%. And those are real scores. But neither of those benchmarks ran against Opus 5 directly, so I can't award a win based on them because these are different test setups, and that's a real caveat. Honestly, I went in thinking Fable 5's coding scores would push it ahead. But the only direct matchups we have both go to Claude Opus 5. OS World, Arc AGI, and near parity on Cursor Bench at half the cost. Claude Opus 5 takes this one, which puts the score at Opus 5-1, Fable 5-0, 1 tied. Test 3, pricing and cost effectiveness. You build a product, you run it for a month, and then your API bill shows up double what you budgeted because you picked the wrong model. At any real volume, a 2x price gap compounds fast and it comes straight out of margin. I pulled Anthropic's actual pricing page, and this one is clean with no asterisks. Claude Opus 5 runs $5 per million input tokens, Fable 5 runs $10, output is $25 versus $50, and prompt cache hits are 50 cents versus $1. Every single token category is exactly half the price for Opus 5, so that's a flat 2x surcharge for Fable 5 across the board. I was expecting some hidden discount or volume tier to muddy this up, but there isn't. 1, Claude Opus 5 wins pricing cleanly, half the cost across every token category with no exceptions. That's 2 wins for Opus 5 now, so the score is Opus 5-2, Fable 5-0, 1 tied. And we still have 2 tests left. Test 4, latency and real-time performance. If you're building anything interactive, a chatbot, a live coding assistant, a real-time agent, a model that takes 109 seconds to start responding is going to feel completely broken to your users, and that's a product experience problem you can't paper over. What I found here is kind of frustrating, honestly. Opus 5 has a published low-effort TTFT of about 2.81 seconds on Amazon Bedrock, while Fable 5 publishes a max-effort TTFT of 109 seconds with 63.4 tokens per second output after that, but those are different effort levels, so you can't actually compare them. It's apples and oranges, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I was expecting at least one clean data point to call a winner, but neither vendor published numbers at the same effort level, so this one's a no call. Another tie, which moves the tally to Opus 5-2, Fable 5.0 two-tied until both sides publish latency at the same settings. Any comparison here is just guesswork. Test 5, creative writing quality. If you're using either of these models for marketing copy, story generation, or any kind of stylistic writing work, picking the wrong one means you're either paying twice as much for no reason or you're getting inconsistent output that your team has to rewrite anyway. Honestly, I looked everywhere for published creative writing benchmarks on either of these models and came up empty. Not a single head-to-head comparison exists. There's some community sentiment that Fable 5 can be unpredictable on creative tasks, sometimes brilliant, sometimes off. But that's anecdotal and I'm not scoring on vibes. And this is a real blind spot for both Anthropic and the broader community. Neither vendor published creative writing benchmarks, and there's no third-party evaluation to point to, so any claim you see about one being more creative than the other is just someone's personal experience. Take it with a serious grain of salt. I was expecting at least some community benchmark to exist here, but there's nothing to score. No data, no winner. Third tie. Final scoreboard, Claude Opus 5.2 wins, Fable 5.0 wins 3 tied, which is actually a cleaner result than I anticipated. And it makes the decision rule pretty straightforward. Claude Opus 5 wins on price. Full stop, $5 input, $25 output per million tokens, exactly half of Fable 5 across every category. It also wins the only direct reasoning matchups we have. OS World 2.0 and RKGI 3 by wide margins, and on Cursor Bench, it delivers near identical quality at half the cost per task. Fable 5 posts strong isolated coding numbers, SWE Bench Pro at 80.3%, and Frontier Code at 29.3%, though neither ran directly against Opus 5. It also has a richer effort level system, supporting up to 32,000 thinking tokens for complex problems, which could matter if you need maximum reasoning depth on a single hard task. Honestly, I went in thinking this would be closer. It wasn't. If you're running agentic workflows, coding pipelines, or anything at volume where cost per task matters, go with Claude Opus 5. Half the price wins the direct benchmarks. If you need maximum thinking depth on a single hard problem and you can absorb the 2x cost, Fable 5 is still a serious model. But for most people, $5 beats 10.